very difficult for me too, but
Yeah.
hold on, let me just, but then when they said I had to make the meeting identical to the previous call, I did. Making life difficult, I think, for all of us.
I apologize for that. There's just a little bit of confusion, so we'll make sure that doesn't happen again.
Oh, I learned a lot about meeting agendas.
You become a pro after a bit.
I hope so. What I wanted to well, I'll call the meeting to order at 4:09 of the Finance Subcommittee for the Wellington School Building Committee. Present are myself, Erica, and Ralph. Are you there? No, I see Ralph, but I don't know if he's actually.
He's here, but he's not a member of the subcommittee. So I would say he's now watching as a member of the public.
Oh, okay. So
I'm just listening in, that's all.
very good. We discussed some general aspects of the project financially in the last meeting we had, and then we failed to have a meeting because I didn't post properly. So before we get into more, what I got confused about, Erica, was the last meeting we had was in person. And then we decided at that meeting we would have, which I thought was a great idea, this meeting before our regular meeting.
Yes.
I would like to have it like in that 5 o'clock time frame, not like this, because this
No,
was
I agree.
very disruptive for me too. So does that make sense? Justin's not here, I guess, but does that make sense that we do a Zoom until because as long as we're in Zoom in the other meeting, how would we be in like our regular meeting and then go to a Zoom meeting?
So you would do it as two different, oops, I apologize. We would do it as two regular meetings. We would have ours with one Zoom link, which we would be in and we would record. And then when we conclude ours, we would then join. So
Okay.
ideally before 6:30, then we would join
So
the link for that meeting.
It doesn't make sense for us to have an in-person meeting and then go to the regular meeting for Zoom.
Well, as long as we stay in the fully virtual period, that's fine.
Okay.
Right. So if we go to a hybrid model, we could meet in person in a separate room and then hop on over to that meeting. Or we could stay virtual this way if everybody it would depend on the group. But if the three of us can be in person, we can meet in person. And then if you wanted to attend in person, right now, we won't have the ability after April 30th. The House has, I think the bill is waiting to be passed the Senate or the House. I apologize. I'm trying to keep them all straight. So right now we don't have the ability to have hybrid meetings past April 30th, but we anticipate that happening. We can either do fully Zoom if our commission stays fully virtual, or we can move to hybrid model. That certainly is up to us. I'm not opposed to meeting in person currently.
Okay. So now that I'm totally confused, does it make sense just to do our subcommittee meeting in Zoom as long as the main meeting's in Zoom?
Yes.
Okay.
I say we follow whatever method the main meeting is following.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't think we thought about it at our last meeting. We just said, oh yeah, we'll do it the same day. And I like that idea. I just didn't think about the practicality of it. So, okay, that's good. With that out of the way, I think the main thing I want to focus on in this meeting, or at least get a start on it, is coming up with some way of looking at per pupil cost.
Mm-hmm.
Because so much of our discussions in our own committee and then frequently during the town budget meetings at the Board of Ed and the Board of Finance focus on the fact that we have two schools and higher costs as a result of that. So I'm thinking if we can demonstrate the one thing we all agree on, which is amazing to me, that we want one school, that we should be able to show some kind of cost savings And I guess Justin's not here yet, but
Right. So
Does that
I agree, and I know we'd like to talk about that, Peter, and one of the tasks I was charged with was speaking with Superintendent Stevens about just that. So as you know, in the past, Phil has spoke in general about what kinds of things could be cut and about kind of a general estimate of costs that could be cut if we combine to one school. And so I would say, after my conversations with him, what he's willing to share publicly, because we do currently still have 2 schools. We don't have a plan for a school, is that he's thinking there could be, approximately $600,000 in savings in the result. What that would look like would be determined by the needs of the school. So, and what we wouldn't want to do is say what we would be cutting or what it would make up those dollars. That's up to the Board of Education to determine. And, having those conversations can affect jobs within the school. And we don't want to negatively impact that, especially because we don't have a project. So while I know, we could take a look at a budget, we're not going to be determining where those expenses stem from. And the superintendent's comments, which he's made publicly, and was the same thing he shared with me, is we'd be looking at about $600,000 of potential savings.
I understand all of that, and then I agree with all of it. I thought it would still be good to look at it in a very general way. And what I did, Erica, is because I know you were going to try and get some data for us on this committee, and I know that's something that Phil would have to work on, and he has a lot of things to do. So I went to the Board of Ed, or I should say the school website, where past budgets are stored. And that was helpful because I couldn't even get anything from Donna that was helpful. She got mad at me too and said it was too complicated. So that was the end of that. So I just acted like I was Joe Q Public, went to the school site of the town website.
Mhm.
And there's budget summaries in there. It's not like a breakdown like Donna does when you guys do the budget in the budget season. It's just the large financial, groupings or categories that takes that. I don't know if you know, and I looked at that, and then I worked through it and said what could change from 2 schools to 1, just like a common sense kind of approach. And I worked something up, off of that in Excel, and I want to review that in this meeting. I want to do it in the last meeting, just as a starting point of what I thought might make sense, with a lot of large areas basically unchanged, because like you just said, Erica, I don't know what the superintendent and the Board of Ed would do or not do. We won't really know till we see the ed specs, I'm guessing. I don't know. But I thought there were some things that were kind of apparent, and I worked through it and worked up some numbers I just want to share with the subcommittee, not necessarily with anyone else, just as an informal exercise.
I'm not opposed to that. What I'd be cautious of is for us to begin, us as a subcommittee, to have any discussions about what will and won't be cut. There are some things that seem logical to us, but we are not making those decisions. That is not up to this subcommittee or the school building committee. So I would be hesitant for us to really get into the weeds of what would be cut and what wouldn't, because and the budget you're looking at, I'm sure is exactly the budget that Phil puts out. He does it now, and it began with our interim superintendent between Dave Harding and Phil Stevens in the programmatic form. And so that's probably what you saw there. I believe there are 10 programs. and you see the breakdown in costs within those programs.
Yes, yes. No,
Yeah, so that is the budget.
building maintenance was one of them, and I
Correct.
figured that was pretty non-controversial.
Yes,
Um,
and so it's very possible, but depending on what the new school or the newly renovated school looks like, what we might assume would be the makeup of staffing within the building maintenance area, because that building maintenance program houses some staff within it. I just think it's we're working a little bit outside of our lane if we start delving into what in the budget could be cut, but hear from the superintendent that he believes at a first blush, we could cut about $600,000 out of that operating budget. If we go into the weeds, I think we're stepping outside of our lane and delving a little bit into waters that aren't ours to navigate.
Okay, I think
I mean,
did-
I'm willing to look at what you want, but I'd be uncomfortable publicly having conversations about what we think should and should not be cut.
Well, I guess this meeting is public, right?
That is correct.
Well, okay. What way could we do this then? Would you like me to submit it to Phil first? It's just a starting point. It's very benign. I mean, it just,
But I think other than knowing about what the number would be, so if we cut, let's take their budget this year, let's say $600,000. Let's call it 650 if we want to add some of the increased costs, right? And contractual costs, and take that against that number and just do our simple, we're not using the state's method for per pupil cost.
no,
and
it's too
divide- It's
complicated.
very complicated. I have had the formula and I've still not been able to get to the number they get to. So utilize that method and then see what our per pupil would be if we cut those dollars and see what that looked like. Because anything other than a general figure is not the work that we are tasked to do, or in my opinion, we should. That is the Board of Education work and the superintendent to be determining the needs of the school. So when we get into the weeds about what we think could be cut, I just don't think that's our role, and probably not the best use of our time. That's my opinion. So and so why don't we take that based on what you have and see what you think the per pupil would be?
Would it be okay if I share the document that I prepared? Just, it's not really, it's like a worksheet almost, not really it's nothing formal.
If you'd like to share, you can share.
Sure. So let me, I've never screen shared before.
If you hit the green screen share button, you should have the ability to share, and then it'll let you pick your screen.
Hold on. Green, I'm looking for a green. Oh, let me make my screen bigger. Oh, okay, screen share. Okay. And now I could just go to my files.
And Peter, I apologize. I probably got about 10 minutes and then I do have a meeting.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to get to my,
Did you see an option for, one of the things you can do if you want to share that with Justin and I to kind of take a look at before our next meeting
Mhm.
and give us some time to digest it and see what that looks like.
I could do that versus now, because like I kind of just wanted to walk through it category by category, most of which I left alone because I agree with you. I don't want to step onto the toes of either the superintendent or the Board of Education. For example, it's the staffing of both schools. How would I possibly know it's going to change? What I want to get a sense of was, and interestingly, Erica, I came to about the same number that you just mentioned, that Phil mentioned. I was like around 700,000. Not going into any of those areas that are going to be what Phil and the Board of Education would tell us. I'm assuming based on what would come out of an ed spec. Well, okay. I know you're pressed for time. I don't see Justin. Is he here?
I don't know. He has not popped in, and I'm just trying to peek at my email. Sometimes I get an email when someone has joined a meeting and he didn't join it prior to us starting.
Yeah, maybe it was just too
Yeah,
much.
the time, I know the time frame could have been an issue if I recall. 4 o'clock was kind of a tougher time for him. So what we'll do is before we have our next meeting, and do you want to meet 2 weeks from now at that May 4th meeting?
Yes, and
Okay.
I'm thinking like 5 o'clock is a
Okay.
better time than this early
I would say
afternoon.
5 or 5:30 would be perfect.
You think 5:30 is okay?
I think so. I think, we limit ourselves to an hour, and then we hop on over to our regular SBC meeting.
Okay, then what I'm gonna do is send out my kind of starting point. That's all I want to call it. I don't want to call it anything else. I'm not saying I'm cutting anything, because I'm not. I just think that we need to have some sense of what that cost could be, one school versus 2 schools. And I think there'd be good input from Scott too, on that, because he's going to have a better sense of the efficiencies of the single building.
Mhm.
But that's what I'll do then. I will send out this spreadsheet that I worked off of, and it's off of a 2-year-old budget, because
Okay.
last year's budget is not stored there yet, but the previous year's one is.
Okay.
So I thought it's like I'm using something that is pretty close to our real numbers, I think, but not something that's like you were saying, a cut document. It's not that at all. I just think it's going to be a major question the town's going to ask us, because we've said it so many times.
And it will also get easier to discuss when we do have a project. So once we have a project, not 2 potential projects, then it will be easy to say within this project with these ed specs, these are the staffing needs and the building needs that we need. And then the Board of Education and the superintendent will be able to share with us probably a more concrete number at that point. So this is, using Phil's very, generic number. Certainly he has more idea of what that would be made up of. And I can understand why you'd be cautious to speak in more specific terms. People get a little bit nervous and antsy. Although it's very public that we are looking towards a project, but we don't have one defined yet. So let's take a look at that, and then we'll work on May 4th meeting. And then if you just reach out to Kelsey, she will get you a Zoom link, and
she'll get me my own Zoom link, so I don't have to like bother you to start the meeting.
It will be with the town one, so I'll still start the meeting. We go back to that time. I just didn't know it would be this early when I had things scheduled for today.
I was so
Yeah.
concerned about
happens.
not screwing up the call or the agenda that I did everything identical. That's what Catherine told me to do.
Right. No, it happens. And, we get to pick our own time. They've been meeting at 4 o'clock. So we'll just make sure it fits next time. But because it was just yesterday, I just didn't have the opportunity to change some of the things.
It was bad for me too.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Kelsey will get you the Zoom link. I'll start the meeting. And we'll just go like normal.
Could I ask one other thing, Erica? And
Yes.
I know you're pressed for time. And that is the ed specs that Phil and Scott are working on. I know we're not getting those tonight in our meeting, right? But
not that I know, because the Board of Education hasn't approved any.
But what he did say in the last meeting was that he and Scott. Scott said he and Phil have a basic outline of it.
And I believe that was presented to the Board of Education.
Oh, it was?
They had, they had a special meeting. April 4th, maybe. I think April 4th, they had a special meeting. So they began discussing ed specs at that point.
I'm just wondering if that's something that we could get access to.
That I don't know, and I don't know if they'll put that out there until it's done, but we certainly can ask that question this evening.
Okay, I'll bring it up.
That's a
in
good
the-
question for tonight.
I'll bring it up in the regular meeting.
Yeah.
But okay, well, not a very productive meeting, I'm afraid. But what I'll do is I'll send out this document to you and Justin and Phil, and Scott, I guess, right?
Okay.
And see if this is something that we could work off of without causing any disruption.
Sounds good. All right.
Then, I will then, make a motion to adjourn at 4:29. I'll try and follow up with Justin as well for the next meeting, so he's present, and, I apologize for all the confusion.
We'll get there.
Thank you, Erica.
You're welcome, Peter. Have a good night.
See you later
Well, I'll
tonight.
see you. I'll see you at 6:30. Both of you. See you in a couple of hours.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.